I'll never forget the sound of my father's voice slicing through the crowded hall, heavy with condescension as relatives and old family friends turned to stare at me. "She's just a Navy enlistee," he said, letting out a small laugh like it was harmless humor. Forks hovered halfway to mouths, champagne glasses paused midair, and I stood there with a plate in my hand, feeling myself shrink into that single, dismissive label he'd chosen for me. Then everything shifted in an instant. A younger cousin, maybe 17, hunched over his phone, suddenly blurted out, "Wait, damn, she's the SEAL who took down those terrorists." His voice cracked with disbelief and awe, and the entire room snapped back toward me. My father's expression collapsed, the smirk vanished, his jaw slack, his face draining of color. That was the moment I understood this reunion wasn't going to play out the way he had planned, or the way I had feared. The Collins family reunion had always belonged to him. It was his stage, his performance. Every 2 years, he reserved the largest banquet hall at the Lakeview Country Club. Polished oak floors, chandeliers catching the light just right, everything designed to look effortless in photographs. For him, it was never really about family. It was about image, status, a carefully crafted reminder to everyone in our extended circle of where we stood in the unspoken hierarchy of success. The moment I stepped through those glass doors, I recognized the setup. Long tables draped in white linen, trays filled with shrimp cocktails and imported cheeses, waiters in black vests gliding silently between conversations. It was all curated, controlled. My father measured his life through appearances, and these gatherings were his way of proving he was ahead. I hadn't been home in 3 years. Deployments, training, and, if I was being honest, avoidance had kept me away. Every time I returned stateside, I told myself I'd stop by, make an appearance, keep the peace, but something always stopped me. Until this time. The invitation arrived printed on thick ivory cardstock, embossed in gold. A quiet declaration of expense and effort. I almost threw it away. But then I heard my mother's voice in my head, "Don't run from the things that hurt. Face them." So I came. I had barely stepped inside before I saw him, Gregory Collins. Tall, silver hair slicked back, dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my entire dress uniform. He stood near the head table, drink in hand, entertaining a group of businessmen like it was a corporate event rather than a family gathering. When he noticed me, it wasn't warm recognition, it was a flicker, a tightening smile, like he just spotted something inconvenient. But he waved me over anyway. "Ah," he said, gesturing casually, "this is my daughter Sarah. She is just a Navy enlistee." The same phrase, delivered the same way, as if I were something small to be explained quickly before moving on to more impressive topics. No mention of deployments, no rank, no sacrifices, just that one line paired with a faint smirk. I smiled politely, shook hands with people who lost interest the moment they heard the word Navy. Their attention drifted back to conversations about vacation homes, investments, Ivy League acceptances. I faded into the background. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was used to being underestimated, that years of it had built armor. But something about being diminished in front of your own family cut deeper than anything a stranger could say. Then came that interruption. My cousin's voice broke through everything, loud, unfiltered. "Isn't that her? She's the SEAL who took down those terrorists." Silence followed, complete and heavy. Even the faint clink of ice in glasses sounded too loud. Phones appeared, screens lit up. Headlines, grainy images. Recognition spread like a ripple. "That's her? No way." But Greg said, "And my father?" He just stared, mouth open, drink trembling in his hand.
For once, the man who always had the perfect line, the rehearsed response, the polished control, had nothing. I hadn't planned for that moment. I didn't want it, but it was there, unfolding anyway. Truth, stepping forward without permission. And all I could think was, this night is only just beginning. When I think about why that sentence, "she's just a Navy enlistee," cuts so deeply, I have to go back to a house that always smelled like lemon polish and quiet judgment. Our split-level home on Maple Ridge Lane looked like it belonged in a magazine, everything in place, everything deliberate. Family portraits arranged just right, a living room that existed more for display than for living. My father used to stand by the fireplace like it was a podium, delivering statements that sounded like advice but felt like expectations carved in stone. Prestige isn't a bad word, he'd say, it's direction. He admired achievements like they were assets. My cousin's Yale pennant might as well have belonged to him. He collected ambitions the way others collected art, carefully chosen, strategically placed. Dinner conversations weren't about dreams, they were about positioning, 5-year plans, outcomes. If your answer didn't align, he wouldn't yell, he'd sigh. That long, disappointed exhale that made the room feel colder. I was 15 when I joined JROTC. The flyer had caught my eye. A girl in uniform, posture perfect, eyes steady. There was something about her clarity, something I wanted. When I brought the form home, my father repeated the word like it didn't belong in our house. JROTC? Why? Because I like it, I said. I think I might be good at it. He leaned back, studied me. You'll learn discipline, fine, but this is temporary. You're meant for something higher. Law, medicine, you lead from the top, not the ranks. I signed anyway. He didn't stop me, he just disengaged, and in our house, that felt worse. But in that program, something shifted. Structure, discipline, measurable progress. It made sense to me. It felt real. When I earned recognition, he barely acknowledged it. When others succeeded in his preferred ways, he celebrated loudly. It wasn't cruelty, it was calculation. To him, my path didn't fit. But I kept going, because something inside me refused to stop. By the time I chose the Navy, it wasn't a phase anymore. It was direction, my direction. And when I stepped into that world, everything sharpened. Boot camp stripped everything unnecessary away. Training tested every limit. It wasn't about appearances anymore. It was about endurance, precision, quiet strength. I found something there I hadn't found at home: clarity. And when I stepped into the pipeline, when I chose something even fewer believed I could handle, I stopped explaining myself entirely. SEAL training wasn't a dream, it was a grind. Cold water, exhaustion, limits pushed until they broke. Hell Week stripped people down to whatever wouldn't break. There were moments I almost quit, moments where the cold felt endless, where the pain was constant. But every time something inside me pushed back. Not done. Not yet. And when the sun rose after those endless nights, I was still there, still standing, still choosing. The training shaped me, not into something new, but into something clearer. The teams became family, the mission became purpose, and eventually that mission came. The one that would carry my name into headlines I never asked for, the one that would bring everything full circle. Some memories don't stay quiet, they come back in fragments. The smell of fuel, the sound of gear tightening, the metallic click of a weapon ready. That mission lives under my skin. We lifted off before dawn, the aircraft humming beneath us, red lights casting everything in shadow. No names, no titles, just a team. The intel was clear: hostages, a fortified compound, a high-risk extraction. But missions never follow scripts. As we descended, I thought about the families waiting somewhere far away, not knowing if they'd see their loved ones again. That thought grounded me. This wasn't about recognition. It was about bringing people home. We touched down under darkness, the air thick with dust, the valley colder than expected, breath visible even through night vision. Every step forward felt deliberate, controlled. The terrain was rough, the silence heavy, and then the command came, low and precise: stack up. The compound loomed ahead, high walls outlined in faint green glow. My spot was second in the stack, heartbeats sinking to the rhythm we'd drilled 1,000 times. Chen pressed the charge to the gate. Alvarez whispered something irreverent under his breath as always. And then the blast. A door that had stood for decades turned to splinters and dust. The next moments blurred into the kind of clarity only adrenaline can carve. We moved fast, slicing through corridors, the air thick with smoke and the metallic sting of gunpowder. Shouts in a language I only half understood echoed off concrete walls. I remember the heat of my rifle against my cheek, the way the sight pictures steadied as if my body knew the choreography before my mind could catch up. One of them appeared in the hallway, tall, armed, eyes wide with a kind of fanatic fury that doesn't hesitate. He raised his weapon, but I was already moving. The recoil slammed into my shoulder once, twice. He fell. His body a rag doll against the wall. No time to think, no time to mark it. Keep moving. We found the hostages huddled in a back room, eyes wide, hands trembling. Their faces were pale, streaked with dirt and exhaustion. One of them whispered, "Are we going home?" And I almost choked on the lump that rose in my throat. "Yes," I said, "stay behind us." But the fight wasn't over. On our exfil route, the leader of the cell tried to ambush us. He was heavier than the others, scarred, carrying himself with the cruel confidence of someone used to being feared. His AK barked into the night, rounds sparking against stone. My ears rang, the world slowing to a tunnel. I don't remember deciding, I just remember closing distance, my weapon jamming after a bad magazine change, and instinct pulling me forward anyway. It became hands, elbows, knees, years of combatives boiling down to one violent knot of survival. His breath stank of hash and blood. He tried to wrestle me down, but I shifted, drove my weight into him, felt something give. My knife flashed in the moonlight, fast and final. He went still. When it ended, my chest was heaving, my arms slick with blood that wasn't all mine. My teammates' shouts echoed distantly, pulling me back into motion. The hostages were ushered out, stumbling into freedom they hadn't dared imagine an hour earlier. We lifted out under fire, tracers carving angry lines through the dark sky. The birds shuddered as we climbed, but no one spoke. The hostages clung to each other, wide-eyed, half-believing. Alvarez pressed a bandage against my arm, muttering, "Always got to make it dramatic, huh?" I laughed, the sound raw. Back at base, the debrief was clinical. Casualties, enemy combatants confirmed dead, friendly forces all accounted for, hostages alive, shaken, safe. Mission success. But the word success felt too small. The headlines broke weeks later, grainy footage leaked, blurred faces, a line in bold. American SEAL team foils hostage crisis. Analysts speculated about tactics, about who had been on the ground. They didn't name me, they rarely do, but whispers spread anyway, enough that when my cousin at the reunion held up his phone, there was no mistaking the silhouette, the movement, enough to make people connect the dots. At the time, I tucked it away. Another mission, another scar, only the teams understood. I didn't tell my father, didn't tell anyone. It was mine to carry. But that night in the compound, under the choking dust and the roar of gunfire, something inside me shifted. I stopped being just anything. I knew it, even if my father never would. Or so I thought. It was strange how quickly silence could spread through a room meant for laughter. One minute, the Collins family reunion buzzed with small talk, silver-haired aunts comparing grandkids, uncles clinking glasses, cousins bragging about internships. The next, after my cousin's outburst, the air thickened like a church right after a preacher calls for confession. Damn, she's the SEAL who took down the terrorists. The words hung there, suspended like smoke, impossible to unhear. Phones lit up across the hall, screens tilted toward each other, fingers swiping through news feeds, heads lifting to sneak glances at me. I stood frozen, my plate of roast beef and potato salad suddenly absurd in my hands. Somewhere behind me, a glass clinked against the floor, faint, accidental, but it jolted everyone back into motion. Whispering rose like the rustle of dry leaves. "Is that true?" an aunt murmured.
Her? Greg said she was just enlisted. That's her silhouette in the footage, isn't it? My father didn't move. He just stared, his jaw slack, his drink trembling so slightly I thought maybe I was imagining it. The smirk he'd worn a moment before had drained, replaced by something brittle. Shock, maybe, or fear. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child. What are they talking about?" Before I could answer, another cousin shoved his phone toward him. On the screen, a grainy clip played, figures in night vision green, a silhouette tackling a man twice her size, a knife flashing before the image cut away. My father's face tightened as though the pixels had reached out and struck him. "That's classified," I said quietly, my voice steadier than my pulse. "You're not supposed to see that." But it was too late. The genie was out, dancing in headlines and whispers. Guests began to circle, questions fired at me from every direction. "Was that really you? Did you save those engineers? Did you kill him?" I deflected what I could. Hostages made it home safe. My team did our job. I can't discuss details. But the more I said nothing, the more their imaginations filled the gaps. In their eyes, I wasn't the invisible cousin anymore. I was something dangerous, exotic, suddenly worth crowding around. And my father, the man who had introduced me moments earlier as just a Navy enlistee, now looked like a magician whose trick had backfired. His entire persona was built on control, on shaping narratives. Now the narrative was shaping him. "Greg," one of his business partners said, a portly man in a seersucker suit, "you never told us your daughter was a Navy SEAL." He opened his mouth, closed it, his lips moved but nothing came out. For once, Gregory Collins, master of speeches, of toasts and introductions, had no script. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I felt exposed. Every bruise, every scar, every long night of training I'd carried quietly had been dragged into the chandelier light of this banquet hall. And while part of me relished watching my father squirm, another part ached with the weight of it. This wasn't how I wanted my work to be acknowledged. "Sarah," Aunt Louise said softly, her pearls gleaming under the lights, "why didn't you tell us?" I swallowed the potato salad on my plate, congealing untouched. "Because it wasn't about telling you," I said. "It was about doing it." Across the room, my cousin's phone replayed the clip again, the flash of the knife catching the collective imagination. The whispers grew louder, blending into a single hum of astonishment. And then I saw him, my father, still rooted to the same spot, his champagne glass slipping from his fingers. It hit the parquet floor, shattered into 1,000 glittering shards. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Gasps followed, heads swiveling. He didn't even bend to pick it up. He just stared at me, pale, jaw working like a man trying to swallow something far too big. "Is it true?" he asked again, voice rough. You killed a man?" The question wasn't an accusation. It was something smaller, sadder, like he was trying to reconcile the daughter who once wore pigtails and skinned her knees with the soldier who had wrestled death in a desert night. I didn't answer, not yet. Instead, I set my plate down on the nearest table and stood taller. Around us, relatives whispered, business associates gawked, cousins nudged each other with newfound awe. But between my father and me, the room seemed to shrink to silence. "You told them I was just an enlistee," I said quietly. "Was that easier for you?" His face twitched, shame and pride warring under his skin. He glanced at the circle of watching eyes, then back at me, his mouth opening to reply, but no words came. The silence stretched, brittle as glass. I could feel it, the fracture line that had run through our family for years widening into something impossible to ignore. And I realized in that moment, the reunion wasn't just about food and family, it was about exposure, about the truth, raw and unfiltered, forcing itself into the open. The trickle had become a flood, and none of us could go back. The party limped along after that, but the air had shifted. Conversations that once hummed with gossip about stock tips and real estate deals now stuttered, caught on the grit of what had been revealed. Guests cast furtive glances toward me, then toward my father, as though watching a play they hadn't realized was a tragedy. I tried to retreat to the buffet to hide in the neutral territory of shrimp cocktail and cold ham slices, but my father intercepted me near the bar. He moved fast for a man his age, his polished shoes clicking sharply against the hardwood. He grabbed my elbow, not hard, but firm enough to make his point. "Come with me," he muttered. His voice wasn't the smooth baritone he used for speeches. It was lower, rougher, the edge of a man stripped of his armor. He led me down a short hallway toward one of the smaller meeting rooms the country club rented out. Empty, dark, but for the faint light of a single lamp. When the door clicked shut, the murmurs of the reunion faded into silence, replaced only by the shallow sound of our breathing. He turned on me then, the mask gone. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. The weight of decades sat in his shoulders. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked. "Why did I have to find out like that from a phone screen?" I crossed my arms, leaning back against the table, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Would you have listened?" He flinched as though I'd struck him. "Of course I would have listened. I'm your father." I let out a sharp laugh, not cruel, just bitter. "You've spent years introducing me as just a Navy enlistee. You reduced everything I've done, everything I've survived, into 4 words. You didn't want to know. You wanted me to fit into your little boxes. Lawyer, banker, something you could brag about at these reunions." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his hands, knuckles white. For once, he didn't fire back. "I thought," he started, his voice faltering. He took a breath, steadied himself. "I thought if I minimized it, if I made it small, maybe it would be safer." That startled me. Safer? His eyes lifted to mine. No arrogance, no smugness, just something raw. "You're my daughter, Sarah, my only one. I couldn't stand the thought of you out there risking your life in ways I couldn't even picture. Do you know what it's like to imagine your child in combat? To wake up at night wondering if someone in uniform will show up at your door? I thought if I made it sound unimportant, if I treated it like a phase, maybe it would be easier to believe you'd come home in one piece." The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd carried the anger of his dismissal like a stone in my chest. I never considered that underneath his scorn there might be fear. "You hid your fear behind contempt," I said softly. "Yes," he pressed a hand to his mouth, then dropped it, "because fear makes you look weak, and weakness has never served me well." I stared at him, at this man who'd spent his whole life playing king at a table built on appearances. For the first time, I saw not the king, but the man behind him, aging, frightened, unsure. "I didn't need your fear," I said, my throat tight. "I needed your belief. I didn't need you to brag, I just needed you to see me." He sank into a chair, his posture collapsing. "I didn't know how." His voice was a whisper now. "You were always braver than I was willing to admit, and I was ashamed of how much it scared me." Silence pressed down between us. I could hear the faint clinking of glasses from the party down the hall, a reminder that life was still going on while we wrestled with years of unspoken truths. "Do you regret it?" he asked, suddenly. "All of it? The pain, the risk, the killing?" I thought about it. The endless miles, the bruises, the faces of teammates who hadn't come home, the eyes of the man I'd fought in that desert. Then I thought about the hostages, the way they clung to each other when we pulled them free, the weight of lives balanced against my scars. "No," I said, I regret nothing because every choice I made was mine, and that's what matters. He looked at me, his eyes glistening, and for a moment I thought he might apologize, but he didn't. Instead, he said quietly, "I don't know if I can ever make this right." I pushed away from the table, standing tall. "Maybe you can't, but at least now you know who I am. That's a start." For the first time in my life, I saw him nod, not dismissively, not condescendingly, but in recognition.